I was further embarrassed by my appearance. Irene Miller wore not a spot of makeup or jewelry, whereas I was wearing dangling earrings, bright blush, and a colorful top. I looked dressed for a party. Irene seemed desperately eager to say something. "Everyone around here is white," she told me in her Dutch accent, staring at my brown skin and black hair. "A few years ago, a black family moved in, not to our village, but to a nearby one. We never saw them, but we heard a lot about them because everyone stared at them and followed them. No one liked them. They stayed for only a little time. Since then, no other black family, or Jewish, or Chinese, or Indian like you, has come to our community. Everyone here is white." I did not correct Irene that my background is Pakistani, not Indian. I lived in downtown Toronto, only 3 hours away from the Millers, but I felt like I'd arrived in a foreign country. For a time, the only sounds at the table were the scrapes of forks and knives against plates. Eventually, Michael informed me, "We have 130 dairy cows and calves." "I don't like animals," Irene rushed to contribute. She took a long, slow sip of wine directly from her wine bottle, her nightly routine, I would soon learn, and then glanced at the speckled cinnamon Australian shepherd to the other side of the room. "I didn't want to get a dog. Michael did, so we have one." The dog had been hand-selected by Michael out of a litter of 6 puppies, based on only one criterion. Who was the quietest one? The canine hush suited Michael because he was himself the quietest of his brood of brothers, growing only more silent over the years, becoming so taciturn that one had to wonder whether he'd taken an oath of silence. He was tall and gaunt, with an angular face lit by overcast, sky-blue eyes, and etched with a cloud-white beard. Like all of his ancestors in the Netherlands, Michael was a dairy farmer, though he'd once thought he might choose a different path. He'd studied tropical agriculture to save the world. He never ended up working in the plantations of tropical nations, but he did make it out of the 30-mile patch of the Netherlands in which his forefathers had passed the last 4 centuries, and in which Michael predicted that his 4 brothers and their descendants may pass the next 4 centuries, anchored there on that spot of land like mountains until eternity. A few years into their marriage, Michael and Irene Miller moved to Canada, to the 2-storied brick-and-wood house they continued to reside in today. They farmed the conventional way for their first 10 years in the country, until Irene, whose hair had then in winters roared red like saffron and in summers melted into the coral color of the setting sun, had an idea that radically altered their circumstances. She noticed that organic, a movement that started sputteringly after World War II as a counter-effort to agricultural industrialization, was climbing in sales, buoyed by consumer interest in health, sustainability, and animal welfare. Spotting a gap between organic demand and supply, she suggested to her husband that they get their dairy farm certified organic. Certification was expensive, but Irene's decision was more lucrative than she'd ever imagined. In the 20-plus years since the Millers had obtained organic certification, the organic sector had lifted off into the sky like a hot air balloon, its sales reaching $35 billion in the United States in 2013. Today, organic products can be found in 3/4 of American and Canadian grocery stores. Surveys show that almost half of Americans actively try to include organic foods in their diet, and 2 out of 5 Canadians buy organic products every week. But Irene, whose hair was now the aged flaxen yellow of scorched sand, was no longer glad about the success of her organic plan. She was sad, beset by pangs of regret and resentment. As soon as he finished dinner, Michael stood up and without a word strode out the back door of the house. Irene, who was still chewing the non-organic lettuce salad and ham and bean chili she'd prepared for dinner, leaned closer to me. "It's my fault," she whispered, her face defeated. "It's all my fault. I wish I had had the idea for organic. I want to get out of dairy farming, but now we're stuck with the farm. It's harder to sell an organic farm than a regular farm."